Alright, welcome back to Comic Book History, episode 103. Dude, guys is next, don't worry about that. So, this one I'm discussing forgotten plot ideas or stuff that happens in certain comics that are just ignored in other comics for reasons, per se. Starting off with Marvel here. With the Marvel characters, Spider-Man himself doesn't have many forgotten plot threads. Like, there's nothing been ignored when it comes to plot ideas. Well, you could think kinda, maybe, but not really. He has been virtually been clean over the past, 20 years. There's been hints of stuff, yes, but it's not really been ignored. It's like they changed their mind. You think, okay, what about Wolverine? For Wolverine, as far as I can tell, the only plot idea I can think of they've since dropped is when his claws became gold. Does anyone remember that? Yeah, when he came back to life, he was brought back to life by frickin' aliens in the Return of Wolverine miniseries. He had golden claws, and then they dropped that. No idea why. But aside from that, that's the only thing major of Wolverine that's just been ignored. Another idea for Wolverine that was acknowledged in a lot of books, and then after a while, they just dropped it right after Wolverine died. And that was a relationship with Storm. It's like, once he came back to life, was there any kind of, rekindling the romance? Nope. It's like the Marvel writers, some people at Marvel just like, nah, we're not going to do that at all. We're just going to ignore it. This particular relationship for reasons, per se. But now Black Panther and Storm, oh no, let's keep that. Basically, they have to be technically married. I am one of those people who think that probably having these two split was a terrible idea. And of course, people will still blame Bendis for it, despite the fact he didn't write the last issue. That was Jason Aaron did that. But Black Panther himself, he's had no... The only kind of plot that I could think of they haven't really done anything with at all is him where he gave up his throne during the John Ridley run. And, he is, in his town, and then, not much on him since then. And now, basically, they brought back Ninja Gods of Empire stuff. For Iron Man, well, there's no real, major... The only thing plot-wise for him, they virtually... Well, the biggest one is one that still to this day, 11 years later, that Marvel Comics just refuses to resolve. And I'm sure that probably Tom Taylor himself has asked about it. I'm sure various writers at Marvel who wrote Iron Man over the years have begged him to completely resolve his plot thread. The whole thing of Tony Stark being evil and then having a thing be undone after Secret Wars, and there's just been no explanation for it. It's just something that I'm sure a lot of people have been questioning it per se, but in the books it was never addressed at all, and it is something that it's a source of frustration from our readers that people just haven't come to grips with the fact that, well, I'm hoping one day somebody at Marvel Comics would bother to explain this. Or a tiny bit was like when Sabretooth took out the mansion for King Avengers with that lineup after Axis, where basically that was something else together, where they had this lineup established after Axis, where it was, I think it was the Vision. It was Vision, Sam Wilson, Captain America. I think it was Rogue, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver 2. Then this is what the weird storyline was established that. This stuff with the Counter-Earth stuff. It's something more was planned here, and then it was dropped. Oh, there is one thing Wolverine they did, in fact, not resolve. And that was the abrupt ending of Wolverines. It's there was this... The series just abruptly ended after 20 issues, this weekly series. It's one of those books that cut up because of Secret Wars. I know some of the stuff I'm talking about here so far has been stuff that's been very recent, in the last decade. But the oldest unresolved plot thread, Marvel to this very day has just never bothered to resolve it at all. I'm sure Bendis wants to resolve it, but he's had no time to. And that is the thing that instigated the start of his run for Avengers. Not the symbol, not that. The very first arc for New Avengers Breakout. The person who caused it. It's like after the opening story arc, they just did nothing with it until, and then after Civil War 1, they did mention it, but then like nothing was resolved. Like all this mass breakout, and it barely had any consequence against Marvel Comics as a whole. Like there was a breakout about 50 criminals out of the raft, and a sci-fi bring up in a mini series called Sci-Fi Breakout, and a little bit in Civil War 1. It's like the whole thing related to the storyline. It just never, to this day, has never got a proper resolution. But knowing Marvel, they probably never will, because it's Marvel. Another thing Bendis established, that someone did point this out though, that it was established post-Fear itself, and then no mention of it afterwards, barely anything afterwards, until it was just undone with the event Infinity. And that being the relationship between Hawkeye and the Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. It's like, after Fear itself, they established these two as a couple, and nothing. No, seriously, nothing. It wasn't referenced in the Hawkeye book, per se. It was referenced nowhere. Like, it was a mild mention of it in New Avengers, but afterwards, there was nothing until, like, Infinity, where they just magically broke up. I'm like, what was the point of basically putting two together if Marvel was not doing anything with these two characters? I'm sure that's probably one that that's very memorable for basically plot idea, at least relationship in Marvel Comics, that it was frustrated and ignored by other writers for reasons. You thinking, is there any other ideas they've had, relationships? One which was never mentioned again was the forced relationship, the very tiny relationship that was between Medusa and Gorgon, where somehow she found out that he had feelings for her, they slept together, and then he apparently died, and then nothing. And this is from Al Ewing, who did this, and this is something that's been virtually ignored. Like, it's brought up maybe for 2 issues of the Royals, and then, like, nothing. Like, it was like toward the end of the book, like, oh, let's have this revelation that Medusa's one of her cousins had a thing for her, and then it was mentioned, oh, he died, and then he just comes back later on, no problem. And I'm like, what was the point of doing this? I mean, this is one of those forgotten or pointless things that Marvel has done. For Thor, nothing I could think of for Thor. Off the top of my head, unless there's someone thinks that I may have forgotten for Thor. Because everything was pretty much resolved fine under Jason Aaron. And let's see. Nothing I could think of, no. But what about Hulk, you might ask? Nothing I can think of for Hulk. She-Hulk, well, there was that thing where they kind of try to establish a relation between her and Thor, where it just came completely out of nowhere. And then once she left Avengers, it was never mentioned again. Yeah, that was another one that was a relationship I personally was not a fan of, because this is a relationship that made virtually no sense at all. And I'm like, what was wrong with having Thor hook up with the original character Ross Solomon? It's like, if anybody read the final issues of Thor under Jason Aaron, anybody can clearly tell Ross had feelings for Thor. And then, like, nothing. Yeah, and she's been barely been used since then. Like, I think she popped up at Ages of Wakanda, but that's been virtually it for her. Trying to think here. Well, there was that thing where the artist had to draw like it was She-Hulk, like she was Hulk with a wig. I've heard the accusation, and I've looked at the artwork for it, and it's not exactly a forgotten plot idea. It's just this is the way she was drawn, and calling herself Hulk really meant virtually nothing. Yeah, I personally wasn't a fan of it at all. But any X-Men ones? Let me think here. For X-Men, I know I'm gonna get to DC here soon. Don't worry about that. Let's see. For X-Men, I'm trying to think. The only thing I think of is that for X-Men is that they've had these characters pop up in the last 20 years, which X-Men is kind of like a whole lot of characters debut in the last 20 years. That the biggest problem with the X-Men is they're just way too many characters for the X-Men. I love the X-Men. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the X-Men. It's just that we have way too many characters, and it just seems as though this is basically like there's a lot of characters for X-Men, which Marvel writers are doing virtually nothing with. Like there's a Null. Does anyone remember Null, the guy, one of the few gay mutants in Marvel Comics? And he himself, oh yeah, they outed him as gay. Do they have a relationship with the guy? No. There's just, he just gay. And they moving on. Oh, let's out Iceman as gay. I still think it's stupid. It is something that all these writers at Marvel who work on the X comics keep developing all of these characters, and they try to develop them, and I'm like, what about the older characters? Who knows? I do know there's going to be a new X-Men United book, which is going to basically be the Xavier School reopening. First time in several years it's reopened, and maybe do something with these characters. That's what they like about early Krakoa, is that we actually gave characters. We had all these group books for all these characters who had nothing fucking to do. And there was other problems, basically, that was with the Krakoa stuff. For those of you who might be asking, was there any resolved Krakoa ideas, per se? Not really. I think that by the time Krakoa wrapped up, there was... Well, from what I can tell, there was nothing left, unsaid. The only thing that was kind of completely out of nowhere was Xavier switching sides, but that was resolved with Manhunt, so I can forgive him for that. Yeah, that's the only problem with the X-Men comics, is that they're just all these characters that it's just... that Marvel just refused doing that. There's Marvel writers that there where they just refuse to do anything with these characters. How about you have all these characters who could do something. You could start up a group book. No, they rather not. Because with the exception of X-Men and Kenny X-Men, almost all their group books were canceled. That came out in the last couple years. There was an X-Force book that got canceled 10 issues. X-Factor 10, which I didn't necessarily probably those titles at all. NYX was completely pointless. Though it just... The whole thing of nowadays, for some weird reason, Marvel writers treat where being a mutant is like being gay. Which is so stupid. And what I especially don't like, and a lot of people, hopefully no one will come after me for this, is the small group of people who think that Krakoa is the best thing, and this is more an outside thing per se, where I get the fact people who like Krakoa stuff, fine, but to bully people online over them not liking the Krakoa stuff is really stupid. Really stupid. But in the case of that's an outside thing, but here's another one. I just thought of it. Civil Rogers, where he was out of he came back recently in the final issue of McKinney Avengers, where he was posing as Captain Krakoa, which you could say was done for publicity and probably to frame mutants for something. The reason for him doing that was never really resolved. Now he's Flag Smasher, and then he pops up for West Coast Avengers, and I'm not sure what he's doing now. It's Yeah, this is a character Nick Spencer created. He's just an evil Captain America. They just probably feel like creating him. He's also a bit of a retcon character. Some people have also thought, though, that the people think that the evil Captain America is the same one who debuted back in the 40s, and the one we see now, the one's the good one, is a copy. Not necessarily. I see it as the evil one was created by the Cosmic Cube, and the one we see nowadays is one who was trapped inside the Cosmic Cube as sort of a replace because she altered memories. This big Spider-Man one, it relates to her having a child, where it was basically asked when she was going to be pregnant for the first and only time in her life that she's been pregnant, where she was asked, who was the father? She has no idea. She's had a whole bunch of guys. And I think anybody can have a right mind pointing out, though, Jessica tracked down all the guys she slept with for 8 months, which I'm sure probably is a lot of them. Here's what you do. Get everyone to take a DNA test. Simple. You'll solve the problem. But no. It's like, it's brought up once and it just dropped. I'm like, really, Dennis Hopeless? Yeah. And another thing, the whole thing with, like, post, like, End of Spider-Verse stuff, where somehow, and this is really, really weird, where, like, apparently, when Jessica Drew was briefly dead, not Jones, it was Jessica Drew, she was Spider-Man when she wanted Hawkeye, where she was briefly dead, and then when she came back, the whole Marvel Universe, except Spider-Boy for some reason, completely forgot the fact that she had a child. I'm like, since when does the death of one woman make people forget the fact she had a child? Heck, even the godmother, Carol Danvers, the one who's the godmother of the child, and yet she completely forgot the fact that, oh, Jessica had a baby. And then they kind of have it where, oh, he kind of grew up and he was saying stuff, and Jessica was like, that's freaking bullcrap, and he falls off a boat. Suppose this was him? This was her child, grew up to be a man, and just brainwashed by the Grey Gargoyle, the whole villain. And then the story, which is never resolved because the book ended a few issues later. Which, I think anybody can see that as, like, really, really dumb. Because it's like, do I think that the book ended because of lack of interest? I think that the reason why people stopped buying it, and this is my honest opinion of the matter, the reason why, because the whole revelation about Jessica Drew's baby turned to a man-child. In my honest opinion, that was probably the catalyst for people to drop the comic. Because at that point, the book became completely pointless. And a lot of people would like say, what was the point of bringing the book having the character have a book in if they're not going to resolve the biggest plot thread? Because by the time the book wraps up, that is never resolved. What happens to that kid? Who knows? Marvel themselves is not going to revisit it at all. I mean, you would think, oh, maybe they resolve in one of their books. No, not really. Well, in the case of something like Moon Knight, he himself has had zero unresolved plot thread, which is interesting to say the least. Yes. And because if you read the books for him the last few years, they've been pretty consistent across the board. Like, Marvel's been pretty faithful to Moon Knight, which is really cool. I do like that. It's just that I kind of wish they would resolve that for other characters. Yes. But with Marvel? No. It's just so dumb. That's what the Marvel I can think of. For DC, there's been a few. Whatever happens, I Am Batman is completely ignored by DC continuity. And I just recently finished reviewing this thing. Yeah, where here's here's one for you. Anything got killed in the book, and then he magically comes back to life in our books. Jace Fox, having, with the exception of one panel in one issue of I Am Batman, has never shared any screen time with his brother. Batwing. Here's the thing. Batwing never mentions the fact he has a brother. Nope. It's like Marvel, DC writers try to ignore the fact he exists. And that he's not the only character that I kind of seen, though, that DC has virtually forgotten. Though they have to keep enforcing the stupid Tim Drake buy stuff, which is so stupid. But I kind of wish they would just ignore that. That's one thing a lot of people love to see him ignore. I am one of those people who do not acknowledge that Tim Drake is bi. Nope. I do not acknowledge it at all. Anytime, basically, that Bernard shows up, it's a non-canon scene. Because it's stupid. Really stupid. It's like, oh, let's freshen up the character by outing him as bi. No. It doesn't work. So, here's some characters that popular creators created DC Comics that, to my knowledge, some writers just don't care to use them. Harper Row. Like, if you think about it, she's been written by maybe 200 people, and that being James Tynion IV, and the writer of the Punchline miniseries, and that's been it. And yeah, she's just been ignored. It's like there's been no explained reason for this at all, why she's been ignored, just that she has. Duke Thomas, he's another character. Scott Snyder created this character, and I think Scott Snyder wanted to be important to the Batman family comics, but do the Bat family writers use them? No! It's like they don't care to use them. Here's another character, Simon Boz, where up until recently, it just seems as though DC writers have just forgotten this character existed. Because if you look at DC Comics, for a period of about 3 or 4 years, this character was featured in any comics whatsoever. It wasn't until Dark Crisis when they finally featured him again. Because that's what it seemed like. It seemed like for the past few years, it seemed like once Green Lantern's wrapped up, it's like everybody completely forgot the character existed. Jessica Cruz, they feature her prominently. But Simon? No. Let's not use him at all. Another thing, and this is something that I have basically used with Teen Titans the last few years. The whole thing with Ace, the current Kid Flash, where this guy has had 3 different women in love with him, and it's like once a new writer takes on board, they just completely forget about the relationship for no reason. First one, Ben Percy established at the 20th his run apparently that Kid Flash and Raven have been together. Nope, let's drop that so she can be with Beast. The second one was Ace and Red Arrow, Ollie's sister, his teenage sister. And this has been dropped once Adam Glass left the book. Yeah, it's like this one was hinted at, and then once the book wrapped up, it was never mentioned again. It's like it was completely dropped. Another one is Avery, the Chinese Flash. And this is one the readers have known about for quite a while. But this is one thing that the writers have blatantly refused to pull a trigger on. I'm like, why do you keep shafting on this character? Yeah, he is a creation of Ryan Venditti, who doesn't write for DC anymore. But I kind of felt this though, this is a character who gets a shaft for no reason. Yeah, I get the fact some people like him because people DC try to pass him off as, oh, you want Wally West? Here you go. Here's Wally. Even though any reader pointed though, that is not Wally. He doesn't have red hair and he's not white. They try to anyways, but then of course they kind of establish a retcon that he is actually the original Wally West, his cousin. Okay, and both basically him and the actual Wally are basically the Iris's nephews. And his whole family lineage is really weird anyways. It's a lot of retconning with him. And I'm glad the fact in the last several years he's got a lot of upside for fans. I'm glad the fact readers actually appreciate him now. I get the fact people didn't like him at first because, and I don't think this was Venditti's fault. I don't know if I'm going to blame Venditti for this or his editor, where they try to pass off as the actual Wally West. But no one bought it. Let's see. What else was there? I'm sure my friend Tim, when I bring up the whole thing of John can't be aged up, that's something that's not been ignored. That DC has acknowledged that they've never ignored that at all. And also the whole thing, him being gay, which a lot of people thought that was his father added as gay. No, it was actually his son. Actually, the son of John Kent. Some people don't buy him as Superman. So that's what DC calls him nowadays, Superman. He's a character in the last, I'd say, 2 years. DC has no idea what to do with him. No, seriously. It's like, oh, by the way, his boyfriend was in one miniseries recently. It was the Superboy Boy of Tomorrow. He's featured there. And I don't think he's featured since then. And I have pointed out a few people about this when they have him outed as gay. It's like he's in Jay's apartment and he's hanging out there. This scene is completely ripping off regular romance scenes that you would see where you have a guy staying in a woman's apartment and they fall in love, make out. It just seemed like Tom Tiller was taking, I don't know if he was basically, he just took that script and made it into Jay. Yeah. Also, the thing with Wall losing memories, that was kind of like, I haven't read it fully per se, was a Secret Six miniseries, which was not written by Gales, was written by the writer who played Dreamer. She wrote that miniseries. I haven't fully read it yet. I read the first issue, but I haven't really read further than that, sadly. Let's see. That's all I could think of for DC. Is there's probably a lot more for Marvel than there was for DC. I mean, I'm glad DC basically doesn't have any unresolved major plot threads. You probably would think it was only for Batman himself. Nothing I could think of per se. Superman himself, the only thing I could think of was the character that was dropped once minutes throughout the book, and that was basically that deputy fire chief who seemed like she had a crush on Superman. It seemed like he was set for something more, and then she was dropped for no reason. Yeah, no reason. She was just blatantly dropped. She was barely featured after the Man of Steel miniseries. Yeah, but I'm at the end of here because I think it's briefly. I'm right back to do my review for Jujutsu Kaisen. Yep, so yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe to notifications. Next up, Jujutsu Kaisen. Bye.